Now we're going to cross back to the main stage for our fifth presenter of the day, John Everett. Now, we've already had Joelle Payon talking about the undeniable benefits of diversity. Now John will have a laser focus on one of the most physical challenges that's stopping the profession from reaching its summit, the gender gap. Let's cross over to the stage now.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I do stand on the shoulders, as one of the presentation's title is, of some very good presenters before me. They've set up the mosaic, for example, of diversity, which is wonderful to see, and the language that we could, should, and sometimes shouldn't be using as well. So that's a real opportunity for me to invest a little bit more time on one of the elements of the mosaic of diversity, the gender side of things. As I was doing the dry run for this presentation, somebody I showed my first slide to said, well, that's a bit of a weird start, isn't it? And I said, yes, I've done that intentionally, because my goal is that at some point we get to a situation where this conversation is a thing of the past, where that slide I just showed in this context is a topic that's weird because we've gone way past it. That should be our goal, that should be our aspiration. So let's go through a few things specifically related to the gender story here. And a lot of the things that I've brought into the dialogue we're going to have come from the SIP Switzerland side of the equation. Being here in Switzerland with literally hundreds of international and national champions based here gives a lot of opportunity to see a lot of diversity in that context as well. I think we're all familiar with this left-hand slide here. You know, we're familiar with the fact that data has been presented to us that there is not very many female CPOs, CEOs, or females on boards at executive levels, and the representation is quite frankly not good enough. But we've also seen data time and time again, as was previously mentioned, that the companies that have got past that glass ceiling are performing better than companies that are not, that are still in the non-diverse paradigm. So I think we're all familiar with that. So let's move on. Let's look at the purchasing part of the equation. Let's look at some facts and figures that we've seen over the last 1 to 2 years from some research that SIP Switzerland has done. It contacted over 25 different international purchasing associations that represent 250,000 purchasing people. So statistically, I guess this is relatively sound. And what it found out that about 50%, or just under, between 40 and 50%, depending on what country you are, what the association is, are female members. So there's a very solid base of female membership. But when it comes to kind of visibility or role models, accessibility, then it starts to deteriorate. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, the number of ladies going to networking events, going to best practice events, deteriorates. It reduces from the number of women who are in the profession. I certainly hope that managers aren't stopping them going. I doubt that very much. I'm sure there's other reasons. And then again, when we look at the next level of visibility, we talk about presenters. How many presenters are on the podium, are on panel discussions? Are they balanced? How many of you seen where there's 80% women and only one man on there? Not enough is the answer to that situation. So there's a visibility opportunity, a role model opportunity. And more recently, this is work from Oliver Weinmann and the BME in Germany. They looked at specifically the European Union and compared that to Germany. And their insights were that Germany is behind the rest of the European Union. So the lower figure on that range is in both cases Germany. They looked at the number of women in German procurement organizations and European procurement organizations. They reached out to nearly 200 CPOs. So again, it's a pretty sound statistical base. Unfortunately, what they didn't show was how many CPOs were female. But I guess that we can draw the conclusion from the trend of those two statistics beforehand that it isn't enough. So I think we probably already have a basis for why this is an important topic. There is a gender gap still. Let's look at measuring beyond the outcomes. I think the previous slide was outcomes of policies or legacies. Other presenters have talked about unconscious bias. And I think in order to explore that in a little bit more detail, there are a number of different things that you could and should already be asking yourselves. Not just the question, how many women do we have in our organization, at what level, but how many of the spot and recognition awards are we giving to women? Are we, for whatever strange and wonderful reason, giving more better performance awards, annual bonuses to men than women? Is there balance there? Are we, for whatever reason, giving special projects, accelerated career opportunities to men more than women? Foreign assignment opportunities, who's getting those? And promotional considerations, are we really being fair in those? And if you don't have some facts and figures on all of those basic subjects, which is part of the pot of how your organization is running, then you probably won't know how to impact how you could change the outcomes that we showed on the previous slide. So I think many people have heard of unconscious bias. If you've heard of it but haven't been on a course, then do that. It's the first step. If you've been on a course, then go on it a second time or a third time, because you will learn a lot more. No one learnt to play the violin on a 30-minute WebEx course. Right? You've got to practice, get feedback, practice, get feedback. Changing your own habits, your own biases is not going to happen overnight. And best of all, give a UCB course. Much better to be really involved and become a role model in that context. Embrace it, legitimize it in your organization. So there's a few insights of things that we could also be measuring instead of just the male-female percentage there. And other things that I've seen from companies who are really taking this subject seriously are listed on this slide. I'll delve into two of them in a bit more detail, given the time constraints. The first one is about recruiting. I learned a couple of years ago about the importance of ensuring that the language that you use on the job advertisement plays a significant role on how many people and what type of people apply. There's a lot of work in this area. Do Google it. There's even software companies that will analyze your job advertisements to say how gender biased they are or not. Let me give you an example. Do you think the expression, the candidate must be an aggressive negotiator, is male or female in language? Versus the candidate should be a collaborative influencer, possibly a little bit more neutral in the language that you use, right? Put a virtual $5 in a glass vase whenever you hear the word aggressive in terms of how we should be doing things faster. That's not a very good use of language, and we've heard the importance of language from a previous speaker as well. So already at the front end of your opportunity, get yourself fit for purpose. And it's easy to do. There are things to read and learn about, and there are things to explore to make sure that your advertisements are gender neutral, gender attractive. The other one that I wanted to highlight was mentoring, the importance of mentoring. Now, we're all familiar with the importance of that, but particularly between junior and middle level career progression. I think there's a lot of mentoring that's dished out almost in a commodity fashion when people are onboarding, and that's the right thing to do, because people do need to settle into the culture of the organization, understands the do's and the don'ts. But as people are progressing through their career, as you saw on those pyramids that I saw previously, there are some glass ceilings. We need to understand the boundaries. We need to help people through mentoring, through role modeling, through those glass ceilings. If your companies are not having those programs formally or informally through employee resource groups, then possibly you should be thinking about doing that, because companies that are taking this subject seriously are already doing it. So let's talk about us and what we can be doing. Let's go back to my original question. Let's challenge ourselves how we can stop this being a subject of discussion. How Tanya in 10 to 15 or 5 years doesn't need to have it on the agenda. Unless we are doing something about it proactively with the sorts of things that I've described previously in the presentation, the chances are it'll still be there in some shape or form in 2030. All of the subject matter and references I have in the presentation, so don't say you don't know where to start, because here's a few examples. And you might be puzzled as to why I have orange as my background color. It's the United Nations color of gender equality. Thank you very much for your time.